Okay, there once lived an old wizard who had a very long white beard. He looked a lot like Dumbledore. Might have been Dumbledore, but we don't really know because none of us apparently can remember the original story. And one day he wandered into a cave, and in the cave he found two elf children. And the elf children apparently were very noisy and very annoying, and he didn't like them at all. And he came up with a scheme to get away from them and get out of the cave. And I'm assuming because he's a wizard, he tried to use wizard magic. But I think what ended up happening is he turned into Santa Claus. And as Santa Claus, he is now compelled to give gifts to children. And so left the cave, ended up giving gifts to all the children in the world, except for the two dwarf or elfish children that were in the cave, Judy and Prometheus. And they ended up becoming very sad and very, very lonely because they are left in the cave with no presents. Super sad story.
Nicholas was older than sin, and his beard could grow no whiter. He wanted to die. The dwarfish natives of the Arctic caverns did not speak his language, but conversed in their own twittering tongue, conducted incomprehensible rituals when they were not actually working in the factories. Once every year they forced him, sobbing and protesting, into endless night. During the journey, he would stand near every child in the world, leave one of the dwarves' invisible gifts by its bedside. The children slept, frozen in time. He envied Prometheus and Loki, Sisyphus and Judas. His punishment was harsher. Ho, ho, ho.
So Nicholas was older than sin, and his beard could grow no whiter. And he was trapped in this cave with a bunch of dwarves who didn't speak his language, so he couldn't understand what they did. And somebody named Judas and Prometheus and some other people were they were dwarves. They were dwarves. And they were in the cave, but apparently he wasn't a dwarf, and he was trapped there, and he was sad. And, and then it ends with something about some children, about gifts for some children who were like frozen in time or something like that. And ho, ho, ho.
This is a story about a man named Nicholas. He was older than sin, and he had a very long white beard. He ended up in this cave, and he was there with several other dwarves. He was confused about why he was there. He wasn't like the other people. The dwarves, a couple of their names were Prometheus and Judas. Eventually, though, Nicholas realizes that he has a purpose, and it involves children, little children, and gifts. Ho, ho, ho.
Okay, I feel like I'm going to butcher this because I have a terrible short-term memory. Really good long-term memory, but not good short-term. So this is a story about a man named Nicholas. There's not a lot to it. He was older. He had a long white beard. And for some reason he found himself in a cave with a bunch of dwarves. And he didn't understand why he was there because he's not a dwarf. And two of the dwarfs' names were Judas and Prometheus, I think. So he was in this cave, and I don't think he liked it very much. and he finally realized that he had a different purpose or calling in life, and it involved children and gifts. Ho, ho, ho.
Okay, so here's my version of the story I just heard, and it made me roll my eyes at the end of it. But there was once an old man named Nicholas, real old guy, and he had a long white beard. And this old man, at some point in his life, um, found himself in a cave with a bunch of dwarves, a whole bunch of dwarves. And Nicholas felt like an imposter in this cave. He felt like he had no right to be there because he wasn't a dwarf. And one of the dwarves' names was Prometheus, and the other dwarf's name was Judas. And Nicholas felt like an imposter in this cave. So um, after being there and kind of analyzing the situation for a while, Nicholas eventually realized he had a higher purpose in life and realized that that purpose involved little kids and gifts and giving them gifts. So Nicholas, with the long white beard, eventually decided to give gifts to little kids all around the world and abandon Prometheus and Judas in the cave and leave them there to rot. So that's the story of Nicholas. Ho, ho, ho.
Okay, so this is the story of a man named Nicholas who had a long white beard. Really long. Key details to the story here. He lived a very long time ago, and he found himself in a cave with a bunch of dwarfs. I don't know why he's there with dwarves. But two of those dwarves are named Prometheus and Judas. And Nicholas feels like the outsider here. He does not fit in with these other dwarves. And he doesn't want to stay there with them. So he decides that he needs to find something else to do with his life. I don't know what these dwarves are doing and why he doesn't want to stay there. But he decides that he wants to help kids, because that seems like a good thing to do. And so he goes and decides to deliver gifts to children. Nicholas with the white beard. We all knew where that was going, right? And he leaves Judas and Prometheus alone in this cave, which makes me question Nicholas as a person. That's the story.
Alrighty, so here's the story. There is a man named Nicholas who has a long white beard. I guess that's key. And he ends up in a cave with some dwarves, and their names are Judas and Prometheus. And he's there, and he doesn't really know what he's doing there, and he doesn't want to be there. So he decides he's going to leave, and he's going to help kids. Help kids by giving them presents. And he leaves Judas and Prometheus, the dwarves, in the castle, and that makes them sad because he doesn't care about them. He only cares about the kids. And so, yeah, that's the story.
Okay, so unfortunately, Cameron was meowing a bunch when I first listened to this video, and I don't remember a lot of the details, so I apologize. But there's a wizard in a cave. I forget his name, but he has a long white beard. So he could be Dumbledore. There are two dwarves in the cave as well with him. I think that they're child dwarves. Their names are Judy and Prometheus. And the wizard, I'm just going to go with Dumbledore, is quite confused as to why he's in the cave. And in fact, he's pretty upset about being in the cave with these child dwarves. So to make himself feel happier, he's going to bring gifts to kids. Maybe, well, it sounds like Santa Claus. I don't know. Anyways, he's going to bring gifts to kids, and he does this, and it makes him extremely happy. as he is delivering his gifts. However, he forgot about Judy and Prometheus. So they are left giftless and abandoned in a cave, and they're extremely sad, and they're just forgotten there forever. That's the story. It's pretty weird.
Okay. There once lived an old wizard who had a very long white beard. He looked a lot like Dumbledore. Might have been Dumbledore, but we don't really know because none of us apparently can remember the original story. And one day he wandered into a cave, and in the cave he found two elf children. And the elf children apparently were very noisy and very annoying, and he didn't like them at all. And he came up with a scheme to get away from them and get out of the cave. I'm assuming because he's a wizard, he tried to use wizard magic. But I think what ended up happening is he turned into Santa Claus. And as Santa Claus, he is now compelled to give gifts to children. And so left the cave, ended up giving gifts to all the children in the world, except for the two dwarf or elfish children that were in the cave, Judy and Prometheus. And they ended up becoming very sad and very, very lonely because they are left in the cave with no presents. Super sad story.